When most of us picture a bank robbery, we're usually stuck relying on, like, old movies.
Oh, absolutely. The classic ski masks and the idling getaway car out front.
Right, or the dye packs exploding in a duffel bag as some guy just sprints down an alleyway. It's a very physical, very visible thing.
And very loud, which, I mean, that makes it a tangible threat. You can see the broken glass, you hear the sirens.
Yeah, you know exactly when the breach happened.
Exactly. And you can usually see the people responsible literally running away from the scene.
But the reality of modern financial crime is just completely silent. I mean, it is entirely invisible to the naked eye.
Yeah, it's happening right now, running in the background of our daily lives. Just keystrokes, layered shell companies, and, incredibly complex international wire transfers.
Which brings us directly to our mission for this deep dive today. We are looking into the official documentation and the internal web materials for something called the Advanced CAMS Risk Management Certification, or as the industry shorthand calls it, the CAMS RM.
And exploring this certification offers a really fascinating window into global security. Because, when we talk about stopping these invisible digital crimes, we aren't just talking about installing a better software program.
Right, it's not just upgrading a firewall.
No, not at all. We are talking about the human beings who are tasked with anticipating the next threat. We're looking at the actual architecture of human decision-making.
So today, we're going to shortcut your understanding of exactly how the global financial system trains its absolute elite professionals. We are looking at the blueprint for top-tier risk management.
And to truly grasp the weight of this blueprint, we really need to establish the sheer scale of the organization behind it. The credential comes from ACAMS.
That's the Association of Certified Anti-Money Laundering Specialists, right?
Exactly. And the scale here is just crucial context. They operate with over 100,000 members, and that's spread out across 180 different jurisdictions.
Wow, 108.
Yeah. And a jurisdiction in this context isn't just a geographic line on a map. It represents, an entirely different set of laws, loopholes, regulatory bodies, and banking customs.
So creating a certification that holds weight across that level of global fragmentation has to require an immense level of rigor.
It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
this isn't just a casual online course. This is the global standard for financial crime prevention.
Which is exactly why you should care about this deep dive today. Whether you are, say, prepping to level up your own compliance career, or maybe you manage a team of risk professionals and need to understand the gold standard of training.
Or even if you're just insanely curious about the invisible shields protecting your bank accounts.
Right. We're going to reveal how the people in charge are trained to think. We're going to look at how they construct the invisible walls that keep the global economy from basically collapsing under the weight of illicit finance.
And understanding the philosophy behind those walls really starts with understanding who is actually allowed to hold the blueprints. The barrier to entry for this specific certification is incredibly deliberate.
It really is. Looking through the source materials, the very first thing that jumps out is that you cannot just decide to take the advanced CAMS RM on a whim.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
This is not an entry-level test for someone fresh out of college wanting to break into banking.
Yeah, the documentation specifies that it's designed exclusively for mid to senior level professionals. We're talking about people holding heavy titles like MLROs, money laundering reporting officers, and chief global compliance officers.
And the role of a money laundering reporting officer carries massive institutional weight. I mean, this is the individual whose signature goes on a line when communicating with government regulators.
They're the ones holding the ultimate responsibility, right, for flagging suspicious activity to the authorities.
Exactly. So naturally, the prerequisites to even sit for this advanced exam are ironclad. You must already be an active ACAMS member, and you have to have already passed their foundational exam, which is the base CAMS certification.
I was trying to visualize the difference between these two levels of certification, and it really reminds me of martial arts.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. How so?
Well, earning that foundational base CAM certification is a lot like earning your black belt. It proves you know the moves. You understand the basic regulations. You know how to spot a forged document or, flag a suspicious deposit.
Right. You basically know how to fight financial crime on the ground.
Exactly. But the advanced CAMS RM, that is like learning how to run and protect the entire dojo.
I love that. That analogy captures the operational shift perfectly. Running the dojo means you're no longer just thinking about the sparring match right in front of you.
You have to think about the building itself.
Yes, the structural integrity of the building, vetting the instructors you hire, anticipating which rival school might try to poach your students. You are managing the entire ecosystem. What's fascinating here is the why behind these strict prerequisites.
Because financial crime isn't static, right?
Exactly. Criminals are constantly innovating. They are finding new regulatory loopholes, exploiting emerging tech like decentralized finance, and constantly testing the boundaries of international law.
And they certainly aren't, publishing their new evasion strategies in a weekly newsletter for the banks to read.
No, they operate in the shadows, which means the defense have to anticipate the offense before the offense even makes a move.
Which requires a completely different cognitive skill set.
It really does. The certification is designed to elevate these professionals from merely following established rules to actively evaluating and building dynamic risk frameworks.
So a professional with the foundational certification knows how to flag a suspicious transaction when it trips an alert in the system.
Right. But a CAMS RM certified leader is the one who designs the overarching system that catches that transaction across multiple evolving global landscapes.
They are anticipating the threat before it even materializes into a red flag. They're shifting from being tactical workers on the front lines to becoming strategic architects of the entire defense grid.
Precisely. They're looking at the horizon, anticipating how a geopolitical shift or, say, a new piece of technology might create a vulnerability in their institution's armor.
Okay, let's unpack this. If this program is specifically built to train the leadership tier, these architects of the defense grid, we need to look at what exactly they are studying to make that mental leap from tactical to strategic.
And the documentation outlines several core topics for the curriculum.
Yeah, we have risk frameworks and governance. We have risk identification and assessment, monitoring, control, and mitigation. And then finally, we have communication effectiveness and training.
Right. And each of those pillars serves a highly specific function in the architecture of a compliance department.
I have to push back a little bit on that last pillar, though.
Oh.
Which one? The communication effectiveness one. When I first read this outline, I was genuinely surprised.
Surprised that communication is in there.
Yeah. You would think an advanced financial crime certification, the program for the absolute elite defenders of the global economy, would be entirely focused on complex data algorithms.
Ah, I see what you mean.
I expected deep dives into parsing multi-layered shell company wire transfers in, like obscure offshore tax havens. So why is communication effectiveness listed as a core pillar alongside hardcore risk assessment?
It does sound a bit out of place at first glance.
Right. On the surface, that sounds more like a corporate HR seminar than a frontline defense against international money laundering.
Looking at it from the outside, it absolutely sounds like a soft skill misplaced in a hard science curriculum. But this raises an important question about how corporate structures actually function in the real world.
Because spotting the crime isn't enough.
Exactly. You can deploy the most sophisticated AI-driven data algorithm on the market. You can hire the brightest analysts to spot the most deeply buried shell company evasion tactic.
Yeah.
But spotting the crime is completely useless if the chief compliance officer cannot effectively communicate that highly specific, highly technical risk to the C-suite and the board of directors.
Oh, because the board of directors and the C-suite are the ones who actually control the budget. They hold the purse strings.
They dictate the resources. And perhaps more importantly, they set the corporate culture. You have to remember, compliance departments are historically viewed by the business side of a bank as a cost center.
Right. They don't generate revenue, they just spend it.
Yes, and they often slow down profitable deals to conduct due diligence. If a chief compliance officer cannot translate a highly technical, obscure financial threat into a clear, urgent business risk for those executives,
Then the compliance department just won't get the funding or the software it needs.
exactly, they won't have the institutional authority to actually fight the threat.
There is a quote in the source materials that suddenly makes a lot more sense in this context. It's a testimonial from Vanessa Chavez.
The VP Financial Crimes Risk Officer.
Yes, exactly. She's a graduate of the CAMS RM program. She noted that studying for the certification made her realize, quote, strong oversight must start at the top, not fall solely on operational teams.
That realization right there is the beating heart of the entire curriculum. It demonstrates that a risk framework is really only as strong as a company's internal communication protocols.
I think the industry uses the phrase tone at the top to describe this dynamic, right?
Yes, exactly. If the board of directors views compliance as a mere checkbox exercise just to keep regulators happy, that tone filters down.
And the operational teams on the ground end up Underfunded and unsupported.
Yep, relying on outdated technology. And ultimately, they just get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of illicit funds trying to move through their systems.
So communication effectiveness in this context isn't just about writing a polite, grammatically correct email to the CEO.
Not at all. It is quite literally a survival mechanism.
It's the ability to walk into a boardroom, explain how a new synthetic identity fraud ring operates, and successfully argue why the bank needs to spend millions of dollars to upgrade their servers.
Rather than paying out larger executive bonuses, yeah.
Yeah.
It is about learning to speak the language of governance fluently. You have to translate the language of risk into the language of business strategy so that the actual crime fighting can take place.
That drastically changes how I view the role of a compliance officer. It's as much about internal diplomacy as it is about external security.
It really is.
But understanding the philosophy behind this curriculum is really only half the story. Looking at the actual mechanics of earning this credential and then the gauntlet you have to run to keep it, it reveals just how incredibly high the stakes are.
Oh, the logistics of the examination process function as an absolute crucible. They are designed to test not just knowledge, but commitment and operational endurance.
I mean, the financial and temporal investment required just to get a seat at the table is massive. The documentation lists packages ranging from $1,695 for public sector professionals.
And that goes up to $2,195 for those in the private sector.
Right. And to help digest all those self-study materials, there is an optional virtual classroom series. That adds another $400 if you bundle it.
And the virtual classroom isn't just a quick weekend review session either. It is a sustained, guided instruction course that runs for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, the materials note a recent session that required attendance every Tuesday, running from late February all the way through the end of March in 2026.
Which means it requires a professional who is already working a demanding, high-stress job to carve out significant hours for advanced study.
And the pressure cooker really seals the moment your application is approved. Candidates do not get an open-ended timeline to just casually read through the materials.
No, you are given exactly 6 months to take the exam.
And the test itself is administered via Pearson VUE, which means candidates must either travel to one of their 5,000-plus secure testing centers globally,
Or subject themselves to a highly monitored online proctoring system, one that actually tracks your eye movements to prevent cheating.
Wow. Furthermore, the exam is currently only administered in English, which adds another layer of complexity for international candidates managing global frameworks.
And even after navigating that gauntlet, passing the exam is merely the beginning of the commitment. This is not a credential you earn once, frame on your office wall, and just forget about.
Not at all. To maintain the CAMS-RM designation, professionals are forced into a strict 3-year recertification cycle.
Every 36 months.
Yeah, every 36 months you have to prove you are still sharp by earning 45 continuing education credits. And they are highly specific about where those credits come from.
Right, 15 of those credits must be earned by attending official ACAMS training events.
Which is quite a commitment.
It is, but the structure of that recertification cycle is a strategic defense mechanism in itself. By mandating attendance at ACAMS events, the organization forces these isolated compliance officers to actually network.
To share typologies and discuss emerging threats with their peers from other jurisdictions.
Exactly, and it's worth noting that maintaining this advanced certification actually supersedes the base CAMS recertification. It streamlines their administrative burden while still demanding a much higher caliber of ongoing education.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When I was reviewing the Legal Center section of the source materials, I came across the Copyright and Exam Non-Disclosure Agreement.
Oh yes, the NDA.
The legal guardrails around this multiple-choice test are stunningly severe. It is essentially the fight club of the compliance world. The absolute first rule of the CAMS-RM exam is you do not talk about the CAMS-RM exam.
The phrasing in that non-disclosure agreement leaves absolutely zero room for interpretation. No casual conversation allowed.
The documentation explicitly states that candidates cannot publish, share, reproduce, or discuss the content of the examination with anyone. Not your boss, not your study group, no one.
And if you are caught sharing exam materials or even just hinting at the specific scenarios presented in the test questions, you are facing consequences that could end your career overnight.
The agreement states that ACAMS can pursue actual lawsuits for monetary damages. They can seek criminal penalties.
They will permanently revoke your certifications, suspend your ACAMS membership entirely,
And they maintain total authority to void your score if they even suspect you had an unfair advantage.
If we connect this severe legal framework to the bigger picture, this zero-tolerance policy perfectly mirrors the reality of the industry these professionals operate in.
How so?
Well, the extreme nature of the non-disclosure agreement is really a reflection of the institutional trust required to do the job.
Oh, because of the nature of the information they handle on a daily basis.
Think about what a chief global compliance officer actually does. They are entrusted with protecting international economic systems from violent drug cartels, human trafficking rings, terrorist organizations.
State-sponsored corruption.
Yeah, exactly. They routinely handle highly sensitive, classified financial intelligence. They review suspicious activity reports that could tip off a criminal syndicate to an ongoing federal investigation if leaked.
Oh, wow. So if an institution or a global governing body like ACAMS cannot trust a candidate to maintain the basic integrity of a multiple choice exam.
They certainly cannot trust that same person to safeguard global sanctions lists or internal anti-money laundering algorithms. The NDA serves as the ultimate, unspoken test of character.
That makes total sense. Integrity isn't just a nice trait to have in this field.
No, it is the fundamental baseline requirement. A breach of trust on an exam translates to a potential breach of national security in the real world.
That really puts the entire certification process into a completely new perspective.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you go about your day?
It's a big question.
We have explored the strict gatekeeping of the prerequisites, the strategic philosophy behind teaching communication alongside risk assessment, and the intense, high-stakes crucible of actually earning and maintaining this credential. The main takeaway from diving into these source materials isn't just the list of logistics on how to pass a test.
No, the logistics merely point to a much deeper truth about the fragility and, frankly, the resilience of our financial infrastructure.
The realization here is that protecting the global economy requires a continuous, top-down, highly regulated commitment to learning. We often think of the financial system as a static vault, right? A giant safe waiting to be broken into by hackers.
But it isn't static at all.
Right. The banking system has an active, highly trained, and constantly evolving human immune system. And the grueling process of the CAMS RM certification is exactly how that immune system stays sharp enough to fight off the next infection.
Recognizing the continuous nature of that fight leaves us with a critical thought to consider as we wrap up. The source materials explicitly highlight the necessity of preparing these leaders to navigate what they call evolving regulatory and operational landscapes.
And we know that these elite professionals are forced into a relentless 3-year recertification cycle just to prove to the world that they are still competent.
Right. They have to continually earn those 45 credits every 36 months, or they lose their status as an architect of the defense grid.
Which is a massive undertaking.
So if the world's top financial crime fighters must completely prove their updated competency every 36 months just to keep their title, it forces you to wonder, what invisible, high-tech financial crimes are being invented in the shadows right now that will force the next major rewrite of this very curriculum?